Beer, a drink, a tradition, a cultural staple. Nowadays, it's hard for people to think about beers without pictures of drunken idiots, horrible life decisions, and the best fight scenes to ever grace the big screen popping up in their heads. Chances are, beer is at the core of some of the greatest stories we've got. Me personally, beer has a special place in my heart. Whenever my family would gather, we would always have beer. Something about holding a cold can, just makes talking to relatives a lot more tolerable. First time I ever asked a girl out, I had a can with me, and though it wasn't there the very next morning, neither were my pants. So, all in all, pretty cool drink. Now, compare that to how we think about wine, right? Wine's classy, refined, something you'll swirl in a glass while saying stuff like, you would pair wine with something like filet mignons and Mozart. Beer, on the other hand, would be something along the lines of TV dinners and your wife yelling. But it wasn't always like this. See, once upon a time, beer was actually considered this life giving elixir, something that's essential for the day to day life. Sometimes it was just safer to drink than even water. Here in this video, we're going to be taking a look back into the history of beer and hopefully figure out how exactly we got to this point. I'm Sam from Unquestionably Sane, and we're here to answer questions only asked by the unquestionably sane. Stay tuned. To pinpoint when exactly the skies split apart, allowing passage for the angels who taught our ancestors how to brew beer is pretty hard. The earliest evidence we have of beer or beer-like beverages dates back to the ancient Egyptians, Mesopotamians, Germanic tribes, and the Chinese.
朋友是一个坚韧不拔的
That being said, historians also believe that humans may have been drinking and brewing beer since the very start of written history. Now take a second and think about what I just said there. Think about those times. Think about the things that we didn't have. Agriculture took us a while to figure it out. Medicine, we got there eventually. But beer, day one, baby. And boy oh boy did our ancestors love them. Some of the oldest writings that we have ever found were beer receipts. Not even joking. They were Sumerian clay tablets circa 3100 BCE, and they were explaining transactions around those times. Some of them included how many beers were owed to the workers. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the beast Enkidu was tamed by a woman, and part of that process was teaching it how to eat bread and drink beer. So there already you should get a sense of what beer used to be. It was actually considered the refined man's drink. But beer was much more than that to the ancient Mesopotamians. They were offered to gods as they believed that beer was an essential part of their divine diet. Their worshippers would, of course, try to imitate this. Drunkenness was called ecstasy and was considered an indispensable spiritual exercise and a state of unification with the gods, while banquets and ceremonial dinners serve as divine services to foster tribal alliances. Basically, the first frat parties were just religious ceremonies. Homeboys were getting drunk in hopes of communing with God, which, to be fair, I think some of us could attest to. But they weren't the only ones to view beer this way. In fact, the ancient Egyptians also had beer for medicine and cult stuff too. And while all of this was happening, another drink was gaining popularity in a land pretty far away. One that was about to challenge beer's reign as the undisputed king of intoxication. See, in Greece, beer never really took hold. Instead, they were determined wine drinkers, and they did this because they wanted to distinguish themselves as people of culture and people of knowledge, as opposed to what they called barbaric German and Celtic tribes, who were, of course, beer drinkers. The tables really turned, however, when Alexander the Great decided that one day he wanted to rule, well, half of the known world, spreading this anti-beer mentality, this wine snobbery wherever he laid waste. The Romans, just like with a lot of things, borrowed this mindset from the Greeks. They too were also expansionists, and so they did, expanding, conquering, driving the south side of Europe, building roads, aqueducts, amazing cities, and there it goes. When the Roman Empire fell, that massive vacuum of power was filled, oddly enough, by the church. But the church back then wasn't what we know it as today. See, back then, it was actually a major world power, crowning kings, waging wars, and even deciding the fates of entire empires. The Catholic Church that was developing in Europe had their roots in Hellenistic culture, hence they too scorned the drinking of beer. And since they were very powerful, they could even make kings to close alehouses. On the other hand, the churches that developed in Ireland had their roots in Celtic culture, and so, by contrast, they actually loved beer. So much so that back then, monasteries actually served as breweries, and monks brewed beer as part of their daily chores. And of course, where there is faith, there's beer. Holy men at the time were reported to, stay with me now, beer miracles. Your local bartender could never. Eventually, the Irish church would send missionaries back to mainland Europe, where they brought with them their love of beer. Of course, this would collide headfirst with the pre-existing wine snobbery of the European church. It was divine sophistication versus holy hydration. Eventually, however, the missionaries were able to win over the hearts of the European people, or should I say, the livers of the European people, as is evident to this day. Think about that. We as a species have been at constant odds with one another over one particular thing. Though people die, factions change, empires came and went, beer versus wine has always been a constant. Throughout it all, however, that mentality of the Greeks and the Romans never really shook our minds. Wine always held that status as the most sophisticated drink, whilst beer was always seen with some level of suspicion. When the Industrial Revolution started, beer's fate was pretty much just sealed. It became ridiculously easy and cheap to make, way cheaper than what wine could ever be, and just like that, it became the perfect drink for the very thing that the Industrial Revolution created, the working class. This then tumbled uncontrollably to beer companies leaning more to beer being a dude's drink and the working Joe's choice. Then Super Bowl ads, there were frat parties, biker gangs, and of course, the final nail in the coffin, Jason Momoa. So that's that. Thousands, literally thousands of years worth of history, all compiled into one video. I should you hope after watching this, it gives you a much more nuanced perspective on the entire topic. Next time you're at a social gathering or a party where beer is present, grab some, show it some respect, and drink it the way it's supposed to, by throwing ragers in the name of the Lord like the absolute barbarians you are. I thank you guys so much for watching the video. Thank you so much, especially if you guys watch it till the very end. Took me way longer than I anticipated to make this single video, but in the end, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Can't wait to upload this on YouTube. If you guys really liked it, you can go show some love. While you're down there, hit that subscribe button, hit turn on notifications, well, because I'm of course gonna be making more videos, and if you guys really did like it, you can go to my Patreon link down below. Also check me out on Insta. Yeah, thanks.